My guest today is Nikolas Hulewsky, co-founder of the holding company called CoFounders, where they start and buy companies. And today they have a portfolio of 5 companies. Thanks a lot for coming to the HoldCo Builders show, Nikolas.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. Everything you can cover post-graduation.
I graduated college a little bit older. I was 27 at the time. I graduated in 2012. And I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I wasn't ready for it. And my wife definitely was not ready for me to take that risk. So she was like, get a job, go get some experience. And begrudgingly, I took a job working in healthcare. And in the healthcare space that I chose, it was home health and hospice. If you're not familiar, home health provides healthcare services in people's homes, like the name, but it's there to get people better, get you back to a prior level of function. Hospice is end of life care. These are people who have a terminal diagnosis and a prognosis of 6 months or less. And so we take care of them as they transition, right? As they're passing away. So I had an opportunity to go work for an organization that was just starting up their home health and hospice segment. And they were part of a larger publicly traded company. And when I started there, they were a $20 million segment. And by the time I left, they were $120 or $150 million segment of the business. So they grew a ton, and I just got a bunch of experience that I had no reason or right to get. Mergers, acquisitions, leading teams, growing teams, those types of things. And from there, I went to a couple other companies, had some equity opportunities, and eventually 6 years ago decided it was time. I needed to own my own thing and have my own company. So I went out on my own, bought a healthcare company, started another one at the same time, grew those. A few years ago, I sold both of those, and have whittled down my holdings to just a core few. My business partner Chris and I have been best friends for 20 years. We actually met in Hungary, living in Hungary, and you pronounced my name Hulewsky, which is how everybody in Hungary pronounced my name, which is great because it's like, oh, that's just the way that it reads. Anyways, and so about 2 years ago, we started CoFounders. And we now have a small holding company with a few companies, and I'm sure we'll talk about our philosophy and thesis there. But yeah, that's my quick background.
Okay. I want to know more about the time when seeing with your own eyes on how to grow a business from 20 million to 150 million, because this would be probably a perfect scenario for you today as well, having equity in this type of business, number one. And this would be very interesting to hear for people who doing private equity investments, because this is something they try to do, growing those businesses, I don't know, 5-6 times. So you mentioned acquisitions, mergers, leading teams, leadership. So yeah.
I got super lucky in having these experiences, and the first place that I went did really, really well. And so I was kind of like a golden child within the organization. And they were like, oh man, Nick knows everything. Let's use him for other things. I think one of the things I learned really quickly is that growing organizations are a mess. They just are. If you think you're going to be buttoned up and organized and it's going to be super clean, and you're going to grow according to the plan that you have penciled out on your Excel sheet, that's not going to happen. It's always messy. It's always messier than you think. And so like the most important thing is getting people bought into a vision, because it's going to be messy, because there's going to be hard times. Like, you're going to have people who experience adversity. They've got to have a motivation there that's going to help them overcome that adversity. And if you can't paint a vision, doesn't matter how great your business plan is if you can't actually get people to execute on that. So that was one of the things I saw growing over that period of time. I think the other thing that I saw in particular, especially if you're talking about a HoldCo, is the importance of centralized back office or support. Now, some HoldCos do that. Some HoldCos don't do that. In my experience with that healthcare company, I was like, I'm going to have a centralized services doing specific things. Like cash collection, gosh, we wrote off so much bad debt because there was a lot of different locations that just didn't have good collections processes. And we wrote off like $8 million one year, which was like 15% of top line revenue, to bad debt, which was ridiculous, right? I mean, you can imagine what that would do to a business. Most businesses' margins aren't even 15%. So that just crushed us. But centralizing services, in particular, accounting, HR, payroll, like the stuff, I think somebody said, the stuff that all tastes like chicken, that's similar across every business. Everybody does payroll, everybody does HR, everybody does accounts payable, everybody does accounting, everybody does finance and cash management, right? Centralize those things. Maybe not marketing. Maybe marketing is going to be really different. Maybe not, specific processes to the local locations. But I think going through that process and understanding what to centralize and what not to centralize is very important as you're building a HoldCo, because if you don't have good insights into those businesses, it gets messy really, really quickly.
You mentioned the vision. So you were a young guy in your 20s when you were working for this business. How often did you talk about the vision of this business, and how did they motivate you to do X, Y, and Z?
The company itself was very entrepreneurial. And so they would say, hey, you're the CEO of your own location. They had like lots of different locations around the country. So you figure it out, right? They gave you a lot of autonomy. And for me, what I learned really, really early on is that if your team doesn't buy into your vision, I already said this, if they don't buy into your vision, you can't grow. But in order to have a vision that they can buy into, you have to actually believe it. It can't be something made up. It can't be something that you just think looks good on paper. So for me, I grew up with a twin sister who was severely developmentally delayed. She's handicapped. And I always had home health nurses coming into my house. And I even had hospice nurses coming into my house because there was a time where they thought she was going to pass away. And so I knew firsthand, like, oh, the ability to provide the service for families who can't provide it to themselves is invaluable. And I'm very passionate about it. And I want to make sure the product is really good. So when I was able to kind of connect those things, then they said, oh, okay, Nick's not just a young, smart guy who sees a business opportunity. He also actually is very passionate about what we're doing here. And then years down the line, my twin sister actually passed away on hospice 2 years ago. And she passed away with the team that I trained. I mean, they came to my location and I like personally trained them. This was like 8 years ago. And then 6 years later, that same team, just by chance, takes care of my sister and she passes away on hospice. My son passed away on hospice 8 years ago. So I also had experiences over time where I love healthcare and I love hospice. It's weird. It's death and dying, but I love that space. And I'm incredibly passionate about it because you don't get a second chance in those spaces. And so when my team hears me talk about that, they're like, I'll follow this guy into battle because he's not talking to me about profit. He's not talking to me about operations. He's talking to me about the type of organization he wants us to work at. And that's why it's so important. But I had to learn it. I didn't like know that like instantly. There were, I had to learn that kind of over years.
First of all, thanks a lot for sharing those stories. You mentioned a few times when you shared the story itself of working in such companies and the lessons you learned that you were lucky because you maybe shouldn't be there and things like that. But why did you say that so many times that you should probably doing something else or something? That's what I'm seeing.
I think it's a core belief that I have that luck has played a pivotal part in my life, and I think a pivotal part in many successful people's lives. Like I really do think if you played the game of life 100 times, me, Nick, I think I'll be kind of where I am 80 times out of 100. I think there's 20 times where I'm on the tail end and something really bad happened. Maybe I got cancer. Maybe I got hit by a car. Maybe I got into drugs. And something really good happened. Maybe I moved to Silicon Valley and got like really lucky. But I think I'm kind of where I'm supposed to be. But when you look back at the situations that I was in, like going from a $20 million company to a $150 million company, they just needed bodies. They just needed someone to go and take over these acquisitions because they weren't growing organically. They were growing through acquisition. And I just happened to be a body. When they brought me on, they said, you're going to train for a year. I trained for like 15 days and then they placed me in a company that they purchased, right? So I was just lucky, time and place. I was lucky to even get the job because my brother-in-law was working for the company. He said, hey, I think you might like this opportunity, time and place. I was lucky when I bought the medical billing company that we bought. We purchased it in 2020 and we sold it in 2022 for more than 3 times what we purchased it for. Like we got very lucky because of COVID and asset prices. So I think if you can't recognize luck in your life, that'd be a terrible way to live. But yeah, I'm just very grateful for those lucky situations that I was able to take advantage of.
So you were in this position, healthcare industry. You so-called got hit by a luck. I guess great bonuses, commissions, business is doing well. Why did you decide to leave, and what was next for Nick?
So that first company, I decided to leave because I got fired, actually. I was doing really, really well in the area that I was. I got overly confident, overly prideful. And I took on an opportunity that I shouldn't have. And I learned, I flew too close to the sun, and I learned where my limitations were. But from that experience, it taught me a ton. One of them being, I'm not a marketer. I don't want to go out and like pound the pavement. I'm much better in larger organizations where I can actually build the team and have some revenue for stability. But from there, I decided I wanted to stay in healthcare because that was also around the time where my son passed away. And it just, that whole experience made me grateful for individuals who are willing to provide that type of service. So I wanted to stay in the space for a little bit longer. But ultimately why I left the job was, I think many of your listeners and maybe even you can resonate with this. Anytime you work for a company, you don't really control your own destiny. You do to a certain extent. But my brother-in-law said to me one time when he was talking about why he started his own company, and he said, I don't want to be at the mercy of anybody else's generosity. And that has always stuck with me because, you work for these companies and many times it's a subjective bonus or subjective how much equity you get. Or even if they spell out the equity comp, you could get fired or it doesn't vest. And so there's something about owning your own thing and having control of your own destiny that is appealing to a lot of people. And it was just very appealing to me that I just wanted to make sure that I could control what my future was going to be like and not be at the mercy of somebody else and whether or not they decided to grant me something.
So what was next, and what was the story behind CoFounders? I mean, you're doing it with your best friend Chris. So how did it all started?
Yeah. So have you ever seen Mobile Home Park Guy?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's Chris.
Okay.
Chris and I met 20 years ago in Hungary as missionaries, and we just like became instant best friends. And we've always talked about doing something together. Hey, we should start a business. We got to do this. And in 2021, we started having conversations about doing something together. And we actually launched a business together. It was a crypto mining company. And in the first 3 months, we did $10 million in revenue and $1 million in profit. It was nuts. It was like at the end of the bull market in crypto. We launched this company, and it's just the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so we were like, we should keep doing this. Let's do this thing. And after those conversations, I sold off the majority of the companies that I had, my medical billing company, my home health and hospice company. Over the next 2 years, I sold those off. He pared down a lot of the things that he was working on, and we started just putting some things together. The first one was the crypto hardware company that we had. We bought an RV park. We have a tree trimming business that we launched. We have an AI healthcare company. There's this company called Texas Snacks. So we just kind of started throwing spaghetti at the wall because it was fun for that period of time. And it's evolved since then, but that was really the impetus for it, was us just being like 12-year-old little boys and finally getting to play with our best friends.
So you mentioned some of the businesses. There are at the moment 5 companies on portfolio: Mining Syndicate, Texas Snacks, Fast Tree Care, RV Parks, and Volterra. Seems like a very diversified portfolio. So my question here is, what is your take on focusing on one business versus buying and building many businesses? Because you had this perfect example of the first place where you were working, of growing this one business from 20 to 250 million. So why did you decide now to, okay, let's buy like a bunch of businesses and let's just throw the spaghetti on the wall?
Yeah. So my personal philosophy is this: when you are trying to create stability for yourself and for your family, like long-term stability, focus on one thing, secure the bag, and then you can have freedom, right? And that's what I did. I focused maniacally on healthcare first, sold those businesses, quote unquote, secured the bag, and then you can decide what you want to do with it. And Chris and I we have a lot of ADHD, and we have talked about this a lot, to be honest with you. Yes, everybody talks about, oh, you got to be like Bezos, or you got to be like Zuckerberg, you got to be like these guys who just focus on one thing and they they grow that business to 100 million, 100 billion, whatever company. And that's the way to do it. And I think that is the way to do it for them. For Chris and I, there's something about the thrill of diversity, I guess, working on different things or learning about different things that has been fun for us. And we've made a conscious choice of, we're not trying to be a billionaire. We're not trying to be a $1 billion company. We're trying to invest in things that we think are interesting with people that we think are interesting. That's like our main criteria. It's definitely evolved, to be honest. We're in the process of selling off one of those companies, potentially two of those, just because we are trying to sort of focus in on a couple of different things. But I don't have the philosophy that you just got to do one thing and only one thing. If you've already kind of, like I said, secured that the bag for your family.
What about those businesses? You bought them or you started them, or how is the ratio?
That's a great question. 3 of them we bought, 2 of them we started from scratch.
And how about growing those businesses? You rely on organic growth, you acquire competitors, or
Yeah, we haven't. We have yet to acquire any other businesses and do any tuck-in purchases for any of the entities that we have. We wouldn't be opposed to that, but our personal thesis and philosophy is we don't want to take on any debt. And so many times to do these tuck-ins, they may make a lot of sense, but we're going to have to go out and finance in order to bring them on. And we just don't want to go take out any debt, and we don't have enough yet cash in the reserves to just buy these businesses outright.
And who runs those businesses?
Yes, we have an operator for each one of the business lines that we have. They vary from people that we've known in the past to people that we've met on Twitter who are specifically looking to run those businesses. But for each one of those segments, we do have one person who's responsible for the P&L performance of that business.
Over the past maybe year or even 2 years, you've been investing time, money on social presence, social platforms. What is the strategy behind this, and how has it been working so far?
Yeah, I say this all the time. So if somebody's heard me say this already, I'm sorry. There's a saying in venture, which is first-time founders focus on product and second-time founders focus on distribution. And I have found that to be incredibly true. So like, you're a first-time founder. What are you concerned about? The functionality, the look, the feel, the aura, the product itself, right? The product is all important. But many of them get to the end of the road and they realize, well, without a sales team, we're kind of nothing. If you look at all the venture raised money, 80% of that goes where? To marketing, to Facebook, to Google, to a sales team, because they're trying to capture the market. They're trying to get the word out there. They need a distribution model in order to monetize the product that they're passionate about. So for me, I'm a second-time founder. I'm not a first-time founder. And as I was kind of looking and thinking, where's the best use of my time? I've become just kind of obsessed with this idea that building an audience, building a social presence is distribution. And you can decide to monetize that distribution in a number of different ways. You could sell a course directly to your audience. You could have a podcast like this and sell ads to an advertiser. You could buy a business and then sell that business's product through your social media, or at least make them aware of it, and grow that way. So like, there's a lot of different examples of this. Nick Huber, for example, has Support Shepherd, Titan, RE Cost Seg. Those are all businesses that his audience is kind of keen on making purchase decisions for. You have people like Cody Sanchez, where she's not necessarily selling to her audience the businesses that she's invested in, but she is selling maybe her mastermind that's $8,000 a year or $11,000 a year, or she's getting a pipeline of potential sellers, or she's getting a pipeline of potential people. Alex Hormozy is very similar, right? He's getting a pipeline of businesses that he can invest in. So I think distribution is incredibly important, and you can either spend a lot of money to acquire it through marketing, paying it to Google and Facebook and traditional ads, or if you're lucky enough, you can build a social media presence and then have the optionality that distribution brings through that audience. So that's the thesis for wanting to get more active on social media.
And now when looking towards the future, building this distribution, building this media angle, what type of investments or companies you're looking with Krish, so where you could make an investment or acquire a majority, or what's the plan?
Yeah, so we have kind of 4 initial criteria to decide whether or not we're interested in an opportunity. And the question is, do we have an unfair competitive advantage? The first one is time. Like, do we have an unfair competitive advantage in time? Unfortunately, we don't have that really anymore. So that kind of has gone out the window. Do we have an unfair competitive advantage in capital? So let's say somebody's looking to sell, they're trying to get out quickly, and we have capital and can move quickly, and like that might be an unfair competitive advantage. Do we have an unfair competitive advantage in expertise? So healthcare businesses, marketing businesses, RV parks, like areas that we have experience in, then yes, we're interested in investing in those. And then the fourth area that we potentially might have an unfair competitive advantage is distribution. And so those are going to be media accelerated businesses, the agency type businesses that you might think of, right? Fractional CFO, fractional COO, staffing companies, anything that might be accelerated by the distribution. So if it meets one of those 4 criteria, then we get into the second level, which is a little bit deeper. We want to buy cash flowing or start cash flowing businesses. If we're starting one from scratch, we'd like to have our cash invested back within 24 months. And if we were buying one, I've flipped. If we're starting one from scratch, we'd like to have our cash invested within 12 months. And if we're buying one, we'd like to have our cash invested back within 24 months. So that's like the first, okay, is this a cash flowing business? And is it something that can return to us in that period of time? Has to be low CapEx. We're not looking to buy things with lots of overhead. The third kind of question is, can we maintain control? So that kind of goes back to the debt question. If we have to go finance it, even though we're going through the bank and people might look at that and say, oh, you have 100% control. I look at that and say, well, on the downside, we don't, because if the bank has to come in, then we lose these potential assets, right? Like we lose control. So if we can't maintain control, we don't want to buy that business. And then the last, final, and most important criteria is who could we go out? Who do we know that we trust enough in this opportunity? We can kind of be convinced of any opportunity out there. I mean, we just invested in this company that does pet cremations, and we love that business, but it's because we found an operator who knows that space really, really well. And then we have some unfair competitive advantages on the marketing side of things. So we know the pay-per-click ad side, we know the Facebook side, we know how to generate the leads for them. So it's been a nice synergistic relationship. But that one, if there wouldn't have been an individual that we were willing to trust and put into that role, then we wouldn't have done that investment.
You have all this experience in healthcare. How do you see mixing healthcare with the media angle you have and what you have built?
That's a good question. I don't. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of overlap between what I did and the media side of things. Home health and hospice is just sort of, I guess, an older industry. A lot of those individuals who are in that industry just aren't as active on the media side of things. It's not because I'm choosing not to. I mean, I think it would be fun to engage in that stuff. It's just that industry is not incredibly tech forward, I guess you could say. But I do think that where I do, again, continue to have a competitive advantage is it builds a talent pipeline. And that's, to me, one of the best things about having an audience is people reach out to you that want to work with you, that have incredible talent and incredible resumes that you would have otherwise not had access to. And so like the guy that we're working with on Volterra, which is our AI healthcare startup, he came cold to us. Like he wanted to work with us because he saw what we were doing. He wanted to put together this technology. And so now we have this AI healthcare startup that we've done from scratch that we're really excited about because he found us through the audience, right? So for me, it would be more on the talent side of things. I don't think that there's as big an opportunity to sell necessarily, or like to utilize the audience to grow the business that way. But definitely on the talent side.
Changing the topic a bit, we discussed previously preparing for rate changes. So the question, how do you prepare for potential interest rate changes in your investment strategy, and what if they don't change?
This is a really good question because 2 years ago, one of the reasons, or 2.5 years ago at this point, one of the reasons that I really wanted to sell one of our businesses in particular was because I knew I wasn't going to hold it long term, and the Fed had signaled that they were going to start raising rates. So in my mind, higher rates, lower asset value, sell now while asset values are high, and don't wait for them to come down. Otherwise, you're going to be in a bad position. So I sold that company. That thesis played out well. You could say I was smart or lucky. I think it was probably more lucky than smart. But since that time, to be honest with you, I've regretted selling that business because it was a great business. It was generating consistent cash flows, steady, in an industry that was growing, had great people, great management team. And I made kind of a fear-based decision based off of the market. And so this is a long-winded answer to your question is I try not to make investment decisions based on where I think rates will go. And that's why it's one of the reasons why I don't like to finance anything, because if we're in the process of financing that stuff, then we've got to take the rates into consideration and into calculation. And I'm not saying we don't take them into consideration now, because obviously rates are going to affect the macro environment, and there's a whole host of things that you can consider from the macro perspective. I'm just talking about personally when it comes to the types of businesses that we invest in and acquire. I'm trying not to look at rates themselves as a determining factor.
So now when doing acquisitions, planning to do acquisitions within the next 12 to 18 months, do you plan to use any debt at all, or you prefer not to?
I would use debt if it was a seller note, if the seller was willing to carry the debt. I'd be willing to use debt if the bank was willing to subordinate. If we were able to get really favorable terms on the bank covenants and our coverage ratios, the collateral that we need to put up, right? Like I'm not opposed to debt just because it's debt. I'm opposed to debt because of all the potential downside risks that come with underwriting with a bank. So yeah, I'm open to debt for sure. I just don't see a path where banks start getting less stringent on their underwriting criteria. If anything, I see them getting more stringent.
And when making those investments now and in the future, do you focus more on brokers bringing you deals, or it's off-market deals, or how has it been so far, and how is it going to be for you, ideally?
All off market. I've never bought a business through a broker. I'm lucky because the corporate experience that I had gave me enough experience to be confident in doing these purchases. But no, I don't like to go through a broker for a number of reasons. One is I have found it really difficult to build a relationship with a seller if I go through the broker. Now there are levels to this, right? Like when you start buying businesses in the 50, probably even 20, like 10, $20 million plus range, they're going to be brokered. Those individuals, they're not messing around. They want to get top dollar for their business. And so for the most part, those are going to be brokered deals. In the space that I've typically been playing, which is like the $10 million and less world of business values, I don't like to go through brokers because I think that brokers just add a layer of complexity and confusion that you don't need. So I like to go directly to sellers and build that relationship because, like I was talking to earlier, I like them to have the flexibility of crafting a purchase agreement where the seller has either incentive to create a note or an earnout, or there's a period of time where they're on as a consultant or they roll equity. Like there's just a lot more flexibility that you can have when the seller is on your side as opposed to when it's an adversarial relationship and you're just negotiating over price. So that's why I like to go off market.
I'm sure there are a lot of people who would like to go off market for the same reasons. So
Yeah.
how do you build this pipeline of such opportunities?
I think you can build the best pipeline by being focused. And I'm going against almost what I was talking about earlier, which is like, oh, we like to invest in all kinds of businesses, which is true. We do like to have exposure, but If you are going to either raise money or take on debt from a bank, then you need to know that industry or that business inside and out. When I bought, a business in Boise, I knew that Boise had a macroeconomic trend where it was growing at twice the amount of the rest of the country. So I knew that the amount of people that were going to be living in Boise was going to be double in the next 10 years, right? I knew that, at least from my perspective, home health and hospice was not going anywhere. And I knew that business inside and out. If need be, I could get in and operate the business. This wasn't like, oh, I'm going to buy it and find an operator to run it. No, if need be, I could go and get in the weeds. I know how to run this business, and it was going to be successful. So if you are going to buy businesses, I think be focused on either a geography, a very, very specific profile of a business, because otherwise you're taking a shotgun approach. And I think you can be successful, but there's just a lot higher probability of failure going the shotgun route than by being strategically focused.
So going a bit more specific, what are some of the techniques and tools maybe you use to find those deals? Do you reach out to people? Do they come to you?
That's a great question. And since this is HoldCo, I'll focus on the way I do it as a HoldCo. I have a different way that I would do it as an individual. I think just briefly, individually, I think you need to learn who you are as a person. What are you good at? What are you not good at? What do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? How much money do you have? What do you not have? Do you want to start? Do you want to buy? Like, there's a whole list of questions that you kind of need to go through. So I'll put that to the side and just say, for HoldCos, I would make a decision or determination. Do you want to be geographic focused, or do you not care about being geographic focused? I would personally be geographic focused, because then I can get and have specialized knowledge in specific markets. And so we look primarily at businesses in the West Coast, because I've lived in California and Idaho and Texas. That's where Chris lives. So we're not looking in North Carolina. We're not looking in New Jersey. Even if the sim comes back and we're like, oh my gosh, this business is doing 30% a year and it's amazing, it's passive. Like, no, I want to be able to get to it within an hour flight of either one of us. So that's like, for us, that's the first thing. It has to be geographically located. Now, you may not care about that, and that's totally fine. For us, geographic specific. The second thing is, once you've narrowed down the geography, then I think you need to focus on what types of businesses you want to do. Many people are like, I don't really care about the business as long as I've got XYZ%. That might work if you're larger, but I think especially as you're trying to grow and scale a HoldCo, you've got to be very particular about the businesses that you buy. You need them to be cash flow producing, because if you miss in those first couple businesses, you won't get to business 10. If you miss after you bought business 10, and that you have more flexibility for the downside risk. So in the beginning, I think being hyper-focused and hyper-specific on the geography and the business type are incredibly important. And then third, business size. This is something that has happened to all of us, where you're like, okay, I'm looking for a business that does $1 million a year in EBITDA, and I don't know, has 500 employees in this market, and is a B2B SaaS. Cool, whatever. And then all of a sudden you get something from a broker and it's like, it's 750,000. Well, I mean, it's close enough. Yeah, it doesn't quite meet my criteria, but I think I could like, anytime you're having those conversations, again, you could be successful, but it's just like red flag, red flag, red flag. Those things are popping up. And the reason I say you could be successful is, like, in my mind, if you're hyper-focused with a specific criteria, you're going to be successful 95% of the time. If you're not hyper-focused with specific criteria, you may be successful 80% of the time. But that difference, the 95% versus the 80%, is a massive difference. And why would I go and bet everything on an 80% when I know I could go and bet everything on a 95% probability of success? So again, I'm not trying to paint the picture here that everybody's going to fail if you don't have those specific criteria set out. I'm just saying there's a much higher probability of failure if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. And you may get lucky 1 or 2 times, but luck should not be your strategy.
What about you when building CoFounders? Have you been focused enough? I mean, you look at a lot of different things, you do a lot of different things, you and Chris. So have you got the finger doing a wrong deal, investing in a wrong place, or how has it been? Because you mentioned the word
No,
focus. And at the
no,
same
we
time,
haven't.
I know you do a lot.
No, we haven't been focused enough. 100% we haven't been focused enough. But what I would say is the things that we have decided to do have been very low risk, low capital expenditure. So that's where it kind of comes into play, where it's like, okay, once you have either some money to play with or something that's generating cash, if you want, like if that's your intellectual curiosity that you need to satiate, sure, go take some swings, go have some fun, right? But just know that you're not necessarily executing on the highest probability of success. It's like people who go to Vegas. If you go to Vegas and think you're going to win, $10,000, but you need to spend $1,000 to do that, you're going to have way less fun than somebody who goes to Vegas and just says, there's $1,000 of entertainment money. I know I'm going to lose it probably, but I'm not thinking it's anything else. That person's going to have way more fun than the guy who's like, okay, I got $1,000 and like, okay, am I up? Am I down? What happened? And so for me, like some of these bets that we've made on these other companies have been kind of for fun. Like this fast tree care that we did for a time, like it was kind of for fun. The AI healthcare company was like, that's a bet. That'll be fun. We haven't done anything yet that was like, okay, this is going to require a significant amount of time, energy, effort, and capital. If we had, then yeah, it would be hyper focused. It'd be much less of a shotgun approach strategy.
You've mentioned the word fun probably 7 to 8 times over the past 30 minutes. So my question, what is the specific goal for CoFounders within the next 5 to 10 years? And it can't be fun because this you're already having. So what is the financial goal or revenue, profit?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
No. It's a very, very good question. I said in the beginning, like our kind of criteria is to do really interesting things that satiate our intellectual curiosity with really interesting people. So that's why when you hear me, I'm like, we're trying to have fun. I mean, we've kind of set it up that way, right? Like we're thinking, we just want to make sure that the things that we're investing time in give us energy and that we're doing them with cool people. But that doesn't mean that we don't have goals. So what we would like to do, and you said in the next 5 years, this is not the next 5 years. We want CoFounders to be $100 million HoldCo that we own 100% of. That's like our ultimate goal. I don't want to be a billionaire. Chris doesn't want to be a billionaire. I think that there's a lot you have to give up in order to become a billionaire. Frankly, I think there's a lot you have to give up even to get to the $100 million HoldCo. But that's why for me, it's like, if we get there when we're 70, great. Because I think that just at the rate of inflation compounding, we'll get there. Maybe a little bit more. But in the next 5 years, what I'd really like to do is have one company that is a consistent cash flow generator that allows us to continue partnering with young prospective entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs to launch other ventures, either by incubating them or by investing within those companies. So like I said, I sold off a lot of my holdings about a year ago. Our crypto company was printing money for a long period of time. It's not printing money at the moment. It will print money again because that's just the nature of crypto. It's very cyclical. But having a company that consistently prints money and having a company that cyclically prints money are two very different things. So we'd like to have one that's, very steady Eddie, as opposed to having one that's sort of kind of up and down, depending on the volatility. So I would say in the next 5 years, if we are generating $5 to $10 million a year in cash flows, I'll be very happy.
You mentioned work and life balance. What is work and life balance for you, and what is not when it comes to building this 100 million HoldCo?
Work-life balance to me is being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want. That's a really cool soundbite, but what I mean by that is I don't want to have to go to an office or have to hop on a plane or have to report to somebody at 5 o'clock every single day, right? I just want the freedom to be able to do those things. The flip side is I know myself well enough and I don't shut off ever. And so there are many times where Chris and I are texting until 1:00 in the morning or at 6:00 in the morning, just because we're always working on things. So to me, what the flexibility to do what I want whenever I want allows me to do is all of those late nights and early mornings that I know I'm going to have anyways. So I don't really believe in like work-life balance, because like balance implies while you're doing one thing, you're not doing the other. I think I want a life that allows me as much flexibility as possible to flex up and down when I need to with my family.
You have this partnership with Chris, and you've been best friends for 20 years. What are your strengths and weaknesses, and what are Chris's strengths and weaknesses?
It's a great question. I'll start with Chris. Chris's strengths, he has what I call the MIH gene, make it happen. That guy is like, he'll call me at 9 and be like, dude, I think this idea might work. If we tested it and we got this much traction, we could start another business. Oh, that's interesting. And then by 9:30, he'll send me a screenshot of emails flowing in that are responses to his test. You know what I mean? So he just like, he acts. And I love that about him. I freaking love that about him. It's also his biggest downside is he acts. And he doesn't build out an infrastructure or team or like a way to track those leads or a clean mechanism for managing this stuff post launch. So I would say his greatest strength and his greatest weakness are kind of one and the same thing, which is probably my flip side. My greatest strength and greatest weakness is I might tend to be a little bit more analytical. Well, before we test it, have we thought about all the potential responses? Have we thought about whether or not we actually want to do something like this? Have we thought about who we might partner with? That's more of my inclination when I hear about a new idea. But I also think that's part of my biggest strength is I love figuring out the puzzle after. Okay, how do we make this work? Where does it flow? Email comes in here, goes out there. All right. Oh, we need to find somebody. Interesting. Let me post about it. Oh, there's 3 other people in my network that I might know that we could bring on to do this. So I think those strengths and weaknesses really supplement each other.
I want to talk a little bit about mental toughness, because you've been going through a lot, especially personal side, your family side. I'm 31. I've met, a lot of people younger than me, a lot of people older than me who are just so much smarter, better, more experienced, you name it. But they do this one thing, they give up. And you've had probably many reasons to maybe give up. But how have you been going through all this and still being this happy, excited guy, doing business, having so much fun with your best friend? So, there probably have been some tough times as well. So how have you been overcoming this?
I'm sorry. I'm going to say lucky again. I was lucky to be born with a personality that is just optimistic, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm also very grateful that I tend to look for the best in people. You know, my wife said to me the other day, she's like, have you ever met anyone that you don't like? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. And then she thought about it some more. She's like, have you ever met anybody who doesn't like you? And I was like, I don't think, I'm not sure there's somebody out there. Right. But I just love people. I love getting to know them. I love hearing about their history and their struggles and how I can help them. Do you like sports?
I used to play volleyball professionally.
Volleyball. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
volleyball.
So I don't know volleyball well enough, but there's like the setter, right? In basketball, it's the point guard. I love seeing people be successful. Like it brings me probably more joy to see them succeed than it does my own self. And so I think that's a personality trait that I've been very, very, very lucky to have. But at the same time, I have a short memory, and I think, okay, that sucked. What can I learn from it? And let's move forward. That has always been my like default. What can I learn from that? Let's move forward. What can we learn from that? What can we apply moving forward? And so that's allowed me to stick through really difficult things. And when things were really hard, to be honest with you, medication and therapy were incredibly helpful. When my son passed away, I think 6 months later, my wife was like, you need to go see somebody because you are a punk right now. And that was a wake up call for me. I went and saw a therapist for the first time, and we're having conversations, and I got put on some antidepressants. And, I had thought up until that point, like, no, you just got to tough it out. And antidepressants are for weak people. But it was helpful for me for a period of time. And I think being able and humble enough to say, like, sure, let's give this a shot has also played really well for me in my life.
Man, you have 4 kids. You're winning in life big time. How do you manage it all? 5 companies, probably more to come. 4 kids, one wife. How do you do it all? Time management, one-on-one, please.
Not well. You have one daughter, right? And one on the way in October. Yeah. I think what you'll find is with every child, and this might be your last, I don't know, but you probably think it now, where you think, what did I do with all of my time before I had a child? And I don't know, people who are high energy, high intensity, they just always find time for things, and they figure out a way to be more focused. And for me, I have ADHD. And so it's like being busy it just gives me more energy. So it's like, okay, cool. I got done with all that work stuff. I know I got to get that done quickly, because then I got to go with my kids, and we're going to go to play soccer, or we're going to go to this game, or we're going to watch this movie. So for me, it's made me more intentional with my time. And in being more intentional with your time, you find that you actually have more time. It's a weird sort of dynamic.
Okay, Nick, how has entrepreneurship and building the co-founders changed your life and changed your family life?
How has entrepreneurship changed my life and my family life? Entrepreneurship's changed my life in a very, very tangible way, because I don't ever have to work for somebody I don't want to again. I don't have to worry about retirement. I grew up incredibly poor. I'm one of 9 kids. My father's an immigrant. And to go from that sort of family environment to one where, knock on wood, nothing catastrophic happens, but, we'll always have enough, it's just like removed a weight of anxiety that I didn't even know that I had for a period of time. So like, that's like how it's personally changed my life. I think for my family, I'm excited for my children because they have an opportunity to see what other opportunities are out there. I didn't even know what was out there when I was growing up. And now, they've got friends whose parents are doctors and lawyers, and friends who travel and friends who don't travel, and friends who play sports. And like, it's just, I think having an exposure to a lot of different things is really, really important. So those are probably, I don't know if those are the answers you're looking for, but that's definitely been the biggest impact on me.
This is perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Let's wrap up with the famous 5. How old are you?
38.
Favorite book?
My favorite book, I'll pick one. Dang it. My favorite book, 3 Signs of a Miserable Job.
What car do you drive?
Kia Telluride.
What's the best investment advice you've ever got?
Best investment advice I ever got, hands down. After I sold my companies and I was sitting on lots of cash, I'm like, what do I do with this? And I got a wealth manager, because I'm like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, how much should I have in cash, and how much should I have in stock, and how much should I have in bonds? And he said, however much you need to help you sleep at night. And I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. That was just very helpful advice. I don't know that that'll be the best advice forever, but for the last 2 years, that has been very, very, very good advice for me, because I initially felt this enormous weight to like, oh, I've got to put it into real estate. I've got to put it into another business. I've got to put it, money away from my kids, or I've got to invest in my 401k, but that like gave me the permission to just slow down and take my time in deciding kind of how I'm allocating my assets.
Perfect. And last one, where can people find you?
Twitter, or X, CoFounders Nick. That's where I hang out the most.
Seriously, thanks a lot for doing this. I was thinking of asking more questions about business and investing, but what's more fascinating about you is how you manage it all when it comes to the big family and the things you're going through. So that's why I wanted to focus more on
Thank
that.
you.
I hope it's fine.
Thank you. It was great. Yeah, I appreciate you.
Yes, thanks a lot for doing this.
Of course. Have a great one.